Thanks for joining us for another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we strive for ways to achieve those two goals. And we invite folks on to help us do just that. And for the long life and also long, happy life portion of the show, I'm excited today that we have Henry Quinlan with us. He is an 82-year-old semi-retired book publisher, and he speaks on non-financial issues in retirement. So I'm really excited, Henry. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what kind of non-financial issues do people encounter in their retirement?
Well, the biggest is, the first one is boredom. And the second is loneliness. And then there's a myriad of other issues. And I point out that the boredom goes across men and women. Same with loneliness. And everyone seems to think loneliness is when you're living alone, but in fact, people can be lonely in a marriage, can be lonely in a home full of people. So it's a feeling that's individual. And so those are the two biggest issues. And the other one is that I say the third, and I'm speaking from experience of talking to more than 50 senior groups, the fear of what will people say if they break out of their traditional mold and try something new. And so there's a gerontologist that I know that talks about many people, because of that fear, are living very quiet lives of desperation because they're hemmed in with that fear keeps them from moving out.
And that's not unique to older people.
No, that's true, but it comes in. So how has it happened? You know, I go around, I often ask people, well, how's retirement going? And a lot of times people say, I don't know where the hours go. But if I start probing, very often I find the hours are the same hours they've always lived, and they've never really changed anything. They're just doing it for longer periods. So they're staying in that restrained life. And men have a much harder time, and they're more isolated than women, and they're not as social as women. So I've spoken to men groups, and I've had responses like, you know, Henry's absolutely right. I focused my whole life on getting enough money to retire. Then I retire and I'm hit with these emotional issues, and I'm really shocked me. Another man said I did the same. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in an AA meeting. So those are the challenges, and people aren't expecting them. The guy that says, well, I've had a very successful career, I'll just do the same thing in retirement. Different issues. And so many people, one man said to me, I used to be a big shot. I retired and I said, well, I'll do some volunteering. He said, I got rejected for my first volunteering. And he said, I'm a little shocked. He said, but that rejection stopped me from doing anything. So, it's life all over again.
Wow.
It can be really rewarding. And I know many people who have really had a rewarding and enjoyable life. And a lot of cases, they're fulfilling lifelong dreams.
Yeah. So Henry, let's back up. Tell me, has this been a lifelong passion of yours? What's your background? How did you start out your life?
Well, I started out my life as a lawyer, and then I got into some professional and personal issues with it, and I was really spinning, didn't know what was going on. So I did two things. I took a course at Harvard Extension on midlife crisis, and the other thing I entered into counseling. The course at midlife crisis was taught by a psychiatrist from Harvard Medical School, and he said, life is nothing but a series of changes and loss. And so from that course, I started watching as I went along in life, of course, I had my own changes. And I come to realize that it's the adaptability of the change that's the key. And so I was watching people who were good at adapting. Their life changes, and they just picked up another oar and started rowing. So those were my models.
Interesting. So did you go right from after you finished with your law career?
I
What
went into
happened?
publishing.
Oh, right. That's right. And now yeah.
And
So
so I've been most of my life really in publishing. And that has brought me to meeting a lot of fascinating people. It took me to Russia. I lived in Russia for 5 years.
wow.
And I had the pleasure of being asked by President Bush, #1, to arrange for the erection of the statues, Make Way for Ducklings in Moscow, and the publishing of the book in Russian. So that was the highlight of my tenure in Russia.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic experience.
It was, yeah. I saw history. I saw communism collapse and the new Russia evolve, and it's still evolving. And I give talks to seniors on my experiences there.
Yeah, talk about change, right? That's
Yeah, yeah, it's all about change. I mean, life, and that's why, and that's a very good point. And I point that out, but for men again. So when communism collapsed, the guarantees that we're going to take care of you from birth to death went with it.
yeah.
So for men, there was huge depression, huge increase in alcoholism. As a result, the death rate, the average age of a male went from 68 to 57,
Wow.
the biggest drop in recorded history. And it was all about ability and adaptability. So I saw on Sunday devoted communists, on Monday morning wake up devoted capitalists. But not many could do that. A lot couldn't. And
Right.
so it was, and the result was that drop in age. Now it's risen back up to still below the West, but it's up into the low 70s.
Interesting. So take us to the next stage now. When you left Russia, you were there for 5 years.
Yeah. So
And
I picked up doing publishing and actually on CDs with videos with school violence and things of that nature. And then when I retired, I decided that I'm looking for something to do. I would go around and talk to seniors on how to write their memoirs. And so I was going around to the senior centers and I did that. And a woman said to me one day, the people really like you. What else can you talk about? So I said, well, I have this thing on emotional pension. Oh, that's good. Let's talk about that. So they started talking about that. And then say, what else you got? So that's how it evolved.
how old were you at this point?
65, 66.
So when you're talking to the seniors, you're sort of thinking about your own future, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been active my whole life. I still am active physically. I mean, playing tennis and golf, but I wanted to do something else. And so and that led to two wonderful experiences, talk about seniors, because I've gone on to help seniors publish their stories. And I've never seen anything energize a senior like writing their story. And two illustrations I did one for an 88-year-old man who wrote his by hand, 66,000 words. He was so energized, he got married at 90.
He said he
And
wrote a thing. I didn't realize that was so interesting. Hey.
and the other man was a professor emeritus from MIT. He went on to write another book. So, I mean, it's just wonderful to see once they get involved in it, they really take to it, and it just changes their whole life.
Yeah. So that kind of does bring us to where you are today, right? How do you spend most of your days today?
I probably speak to senior groups 2 or 3 times a week. I just completed one of my fun things that I did. I wrote a book with one of my granddaughters. It was like a Christmas book, and it sold out. So we were both happy. And
Awesome.
yeah, so I keep busy. I play tennis 2 times a week, golf 2 times a week, and do my talks, and that pretty much fills up my week.
So Henry, how do you help somebody to write their memoirs? I mean, it would could vary. We did this with my aunt lived to be 105, and she,
Yeah.
somebody in the family got the idea, oh, let's have her write stuff down. And it was the most boring thing I ever read. And yet her life, right? She focused on things that nobody, in retrospect, no one really cared about, like the minutia, but her actual life was so fascinating.
Well, you just hit on what I consider the biggest mistake seniors make. Um, and that's they don't use anecdotes. They'll say a blank statement. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I published Casey Jones' book on his life as a coach of the Celtics. And so he writes in his book, there's 2 minutes left, or 10 seconds left in a game against the Lakers. We're behind by 1 point. I call a timeout. We have a huddle. They go back on the floor. Larry Bird gets the ball and scores. And I said, well, that's good. But I mean, what happened in the huddle? Did you call a play? And he says, no, Henry. He says, I call the huddle. Larry Bird leans into the huddle and says, give me the ball and get out of the way. So that little anecdote keeps the reader moving and explains everything. Another one was my favorite professor at MIT. So he and his wife decided to get divorced, and they lived in the suburb of Boston where they had enough land, and they decided he'd build a house out back and she'd have a house in front. And so I said, all of this book you've talked about, you and your wife love the dogs. Well, what happened to the dogs in the divorce?
We
Did
split
you
the
get
dog.
some of them? And he says, no, Henry says, I'm a professor of engineering. I built a tunnel between the houses so the dogs have free reign. So I always emphasize to seniors, you have to put a lot of anecdotes in, not necessarily humorous, but they can be. But that gives fuller expression to your life.
Absolutely. So how involved are you with the folks as they're writing their memoirs?
Um, some to the point where I will edit them, or I have an editor that will edit them and go through the whole thing. And then the magic of writing your own story. Some people have more ambition. So I've helped one man who says, I want to write 10 books. I want 10 copies just for intimate family. Others say, I would like to write my book, but I think I have an interesting life. I'd like to be a little more ambitious and sell it. So we'll spend some money on design and other things. And so I said, the cardinal rule is always have your publishing party in November, because what you'll find people, and invite everyone you ever met, because people come and buy 3, 4, 5 books for Christmas, and you'll make enough money and get back all your costs and invariably some more.
That's good advice.
So it's then it's good ego for them, and they get good reviews, then the book can expand its market.
Excellent. Henry, you've worked also on some books that have become bestsellers. What do you think makes a book a bestseller? Is there like I don't want to say a formula, but is there a similarity between books that really do well?
Yeah. Well, there's two categories. One is celebrity. We're in an era of celebrity. So if you wrote a book, I slept with Donald Trump, you would become
That would be a tragedy.
number one. Yeah, that would become a number one bestseller. Bill O'Reilly figured that out a long time ago, and every November, September, he came out with a new book that he didn't write, but it was always, if you look at the bestseller list, all those books are bestsellers. And the other way, the traditional way is, and there's no better publicity road to the top than word of mouth. Word of mouth. I read a good book. It may take you longer, but that's the way. Good reviews and word of mouth. That's the best way ever.
So your book, how do you help people get in front of a person who would do the review for them? For example, let's see some of these people who have an interesting life. How do you get reviews even?
Well, you start like everything else. You start in your hometown. And invariably, they're going to give you a good review, basically because you're one of them.
Yeah.
But you take that good review and then you go to a wider circle. You go to a bigger publication, or if you're writing a book, say on golf, you go to golf publications. It's a building process, step by step.
So you approach them and say, hey, I wrote this book and I think you're going to really love it. Or you give them a summary or something like that.
Yeah, summary,
Yeah.
advice. Yeah. And now, of course, it's a lot of times you give them video.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. What other advice you have for like aspiring multi best-selling authors, I guess is what I would say, aspiring best-selling authors.
It's always, it's always a good story. I did a book on the cops are robbers. 25 years ago, there was a robbery in a bank in Medford, organized and performed and done by 6 cops.
Wow.
And they got caught, unfortunately for them. And so the title, "The Cops Are Robbers," in publicity, we sent that one of the many press releases we sent to 60 Minutes. That title caught the eye. And so 60 Minutes did a segment on it.
Oh, that must have been exciting.
Yeah, it was. And yeah, it was very exciting. The reporter came up, and I forget his name now, but we went out to the prison in Concord where one of the lead cop was. And I was miffed that I had to take everything off, belt and everything, and he goes walking right through with all his gold and so forth. But then HBO picked it up because, again, the title, they made a movie out of it. So another one, the first author. So I go tell them how to really look for a good title, and it's getting a reaction. So I talk about a woman, her first novel, and her title was Never Sex on a Tuesday. But it sold 650,000 copies.
Who wouldn't buy a book like that?
Well, that's her thought.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I've heard that.
Many interesting ways you can produce a bestseller.
But it's that something that's going to grab you as people walk by or whatever.
Get a reaction.
Is it different now with with everything being Amazon and things online and stuff like that?
Well, Amazon is dominating, but this woman sold her 600,000 books on Amazon with her doing all the marketing on social media.
Wow.
So there's all kinds of routes to the top.
Yeah. Interesting. But it's just persistence, right? Just like anything.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
So Henry, well, first of all, is there anything that you anything fun or interesting from your life that you want to share with folks, just as a fun anecdote, or just to kind of?
Yeah. My favorite one is when I started doing these on non-financial guidance. So retirement, I titled it, "Don't Forget to Bounce the Last Check." And that horrified people. I think I'm promoting them to get rid of all their money. And so I dropped that title, but I still talk about it because the story behind it is I was in New York and I had dinner one night with a friend of mine, and she brought her friend who was a psychiatrist. And he was from Seattle, but he had terminal cancer and he only had a couple of months to live. And he was returning to New York to talk to his counselor. In his words, he says, "I'm mad as hell, I'm dying. And I'm going to take it out on him." But as life would have it, we just kind of hit it off as two people. And so we spent the next 2 weeks, we had 3 or 4 dinners and coffees together. But one day I said to him, when you finish counseling, how does it end? Do they say, "I'm out of here," or you say, "You're finished," or negotiate? He said, 95% plus it's negotiation. We come to an agreement. He says, a few bounce out and the others. He said, when we negotiate and it's over, as they're walking out, just as they get to the door, I say, hey, don't forget to bounce the last check. And he said, if they turn to me and smile, I got them. If they turn to me and frown, he says, we didn't connect. And he says, all I mean is live life to the fullest to the end.
Henry, that actually, I've heard you say that you feel like the financial industry is kind of responsible for people not like really embracing and having a lot of fun in
No
their
question.
retirement
I, I,
years.
talk, I talked to some financial advisors, and I said to them, you guys are the problem. You picture people who are in retirement as this silver-haired, attractive couple dancing on the beach. And 99.9% of the people say, that's not me. What's wrong with me? And actually, my host started laughing. He says, I have to interrupt here and tell Henry, that's exactly what we promote. And so it's 99% of all information about retirement is financial. And I can tell you, I know quite a few people, finances are not an issue. Boredom, big time.
Yeah.
They don't know how to move out of themselves. I know one man, physically capable, financially capable. His life is going to the store once a day and watching CNN. I mean, that's, so I say to men, a phrase that they can identify with, you're leaving something on the table, but it's your choice. It's all up to you. And as often as I give these talks, and I talk to the Massachusetts retired teachers, and blurt it out, Henry, I get it. It's on me. But that's the truth. I mean, you can have all the, I can talk all this, well, unless you get up and do it. And that's why men have a hard time. Their loss of identity is in many cases severe, particularly people who had a position of power. And I can talk about the bank president I know is retired, and I'm saying to his wife, how's John doing? John's not doing well. Why not? Well, no one's calling him. Well, why should they? It's not the president, but he hasn't let go of his past life. Or a cop. He's used to telling people to move. And now he tells people move, and they say, who the hell are you? And they're used to power, and they don't know it's over. So the men in particular can be that loss of identity. Some of them never get over it. And they live their life in the past, and you start talking to them, and they're immediately going back to, I remember 4 years ago, I did that 5 years ago, I said, what's in the future?
Right, right. So Henry, a lot of our listeners are between the ages of 20 and 40. And of course, we have folks all over the place, but I'm wondering if there are things that you could do, even as a younger person, even if you're not like immediately thinking of retirement or not already retired, to sort of get you ready to be a good retired person and even potentially to write your memoirs.
Right. Well, if the first thing is to be aware of in your own life as you're moving through life, change, adaptability to change. You're a young man, your 40s, maybe your kids are in college, and maybe they graduate and then they leave. Now all of a sudden, it's 24/7, husband and wife. That's a big change. Not many are prepared for it. Now, some, I've heard many say, who's this stranger that's in my house? So adapting to that change, and as you go on, start watching people who do meet changes in life, losses in life, and death of a beloved one. That's a loss. How do they adapt to that? So be aware as you're moving through life of people who are suffering losses, but how they adapt to it. I often talk about people in their writing their memoirs. You're going to come to a very painful part of your life. And if I had to say one thing, that's where most memoir writing stops. They don't want to go through it, but there are techniques to get through it. And the primary one is to stop writing your manuscript, but go aside and just write from the gut. And then leave it there for about a week, go back, look at it, rewrite it, and keep doing that process. And sometimes you may do it 7 times or 8 times, but you're going to get it right,
Yeah.
and you'll be happy with it, and you move on. That's adaptability.
Yeah. And how about even for not remembering? Because, in your life, like sometimes I'll meet somebody who knew me a long time ago, and each step has just felt like the next logical step. But there's actually been a huge change in my life, like the what things that I used to do and the person I used to be. And so if I were writing, I might forget, I might sort of discount some of the evolution. Should we be sort of, I guess, keeping a journal, or, maybe just,
Well, that's always a good thing, because if at some point you want to write your life story, there's nothing better than that original material, that journal you've been keeping all the way along. That's perfect. But you're hitting it on the head. I mean, we all change many times in our life. There are many changes, and each time we're adapting. And so as we get better at it, if you're aware of it, yeah, that's the key. You got to be aware of it. Some people roll through life without any introspection, and they have no idea what's going on, and then life just goes its way. So the whole idea of life is to maximize what you want to do, your potential, your enjoyment. It's not all roses, but it can be much better than if you put some effort into it. There are rewards, and be spontaneous. One of my granddaughters came up to me on my 80th birthday and said, "Grandpa, let's go skydiving." I said, "Sure, why not?" So off we went. And so, that's being spontaneous.
that is being spontaneous. All right. And no broken
And
limbs.
it was a wonderful experience, particularly since I did it with my granddaughter.
Yeah. Is that the same granddaughter that you wrote the book with?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, fun. You must have a really fun relationship.
I do. And that's another thing I talk about, grandparenting. So the origin is, many years ago, 20 years ago, actually, I was sitting at a birthday party, 2-year-old for my oldest grandson. And around the table, there's friends and cousins, and then the in-laws and the outlaws and the neighbors. And I'm saying, what the hell am I doing here? He doesn't know or care. And so the more I thought about it, so then I said, well, I'm not going to go to any more of these birthday parties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my grandkids, I have 6 of them, to an individual dinner to celebrate their birthday. So I've been doing that now with him for 20 years, and the others for 16, whatever the ages they are. But what I've done is I've learned who they are as individuals, and build a really great relationship. So as their birthday approaches, they'll now say to me, "Grandpa, when's our birthday dinner?" So it's a very nice tradition.
Yeah, I'll say. And I think that's something that folks, even parents, I think sometimes struggle to make that connection with their kids. At a certain point, you just feel like they're strangers and you don't know how to talk to them anymore, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
keeping up with them in an individual level, even if you have 6 kids or,
And
6
they know
grandkids.
you, they know you as an individual too. So it goes both ways.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts or advice for people who are either thinking of writing a memoir or are retired right now and they don't, the time is kind of weighing heavily on them?
Yeah, they are the most question I get asked very often is, how do I start? And the best way to start is to make an outline. And you have 2 choices. You can write a biography, which is your autobiography, your life from birth to today, or a memoir. Take a slice of your life. Say you want to talk about your education life, or your professional life, or your married life. That's a memoir, just a slice of your life. So that's the advice: to make an outline, decide, and start writing, and pick one person only to be your guide. And the requirement is that they have to be honest with you. So as you finish a chapter, you have to say, is this good? Does this make sense? But only one person.
Yeah.
Because I invariably will have them, man or woman, say to me, well, I have 3 daughters that have doctorates. I said, well, that book will never get written. You got to have 3. I just have 1.
Excellent. Henry, is there anything else that you wish I would have asked you? Anything else that you'd like to share with folks today?
This is the senior years can be a time of great pain because of losses, but also can be very rewarding time of your life, and it's to be lived and enjoyed, and to stretch yourself, go do some things that you never thought you could do, or look at those, go back to when you were 21, those dreams you had. Maybe you had to put them off to raise a family and pursue your goals to make money. But I always wanted to, and I know several people who always wanted to write a book, and they did it. And I think you're too young, but there was a famous psychologist who, Bagalia was his name, was on Channel 2 many years ago. He said, my dream is to go to Thailand and sit in a rice paddy. Because everyone told me it was crazy. He says, I sold everything and I went and sat in that rice paddy. It was the greatest thing I ever did. So nothing is, again, don't be afraid of what people say. If it's good for you and you're not hurting anybody, go ahead and do it.
Wow, that's great advice. Henry, did you write your memoir? I didn't, or your autobiography?
No, no, I did a memoir, oral memoir, which I did on disc for my grandkids about my time in Russia.
Wow. You didn't think of publishing that?
No. I mean, there's so few people that would really be interested in it.
You never know. You can embellish a little and give it a flashy
Yeah,
title.
yeah.
Well, Henry, thanks so much for sharing with us today. It was really fun talking with you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, listener, for listening. I know you have a choice of about 2 million podcasts. I'm excited that you're here with us today. And this is the last episode that we have before 2022. So please have a wonderful, fantastic, happy new year. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2022.